everyone to this special episode on Tighat Forum. Today we will discuss about Ashenda. Ashenda is one of the biggest carnivals in Tigray. Originally, it was supposed to commemorate the ascension of the putative Saint Mary following her Domitian, and it has slowly morphed into a cultural event where women celebrate different aspects of life, starting from beauty to sisterhood to womanhood to liberty, freedom, and other aspects, femininity even, and different other aspects that we will discuss today. We have gathered a wonderful array of panelists today. I will introduce the panelists and I will ask them to introduce themselves, and then we will go into the details of today's discussion. So for panelists, we have Dr. Hagos Abraha, who has a PhD in philology, and he will give us some scholarly look into Ashenda. We also have Chelsea Baldwin, who is a historian and on Tigrayan women especially. So it would be interesting to get insights as well as to what it means with regard to women in Tigray and the struggle and Ashenda and other aspects. We also have Elizabeth Ihdago. She's from Merava Estate, and she speaks on different aspects about Tigray. And we're really grateful that she joined us today. She will talk about her experience in Ashenda and other aspects as well. We also have Rowena Kasai from Tigrayan Youth Network based in London. She would also give us different insights from the point of view of the diaspora celebrating Ashenda. We also have Sanet Haile Molla, who will also give us a different perspective of Ashenda. So welcome everybody. Please say a few words about yourselves. I will start with Hagos.
Okay, thank you very much. I am Hagos Abraha. I have been studying philology. This time I'm working my postdoctoral research in Hamburg University in manuscript studies, specifically in Ge'ez manuscript studies of Tigray. So I think that's enough.
Thank you, Hagos. And Chelsea?
Hello, everyone. I'm really excited to be here today. I'm mostly an observer in this fund because I'm obviously not Tigrayan and I don't participate in Ashenda, but I'm a historian of gender and womanhood and expressions of femininity. So the meanings of the Ashenda celebration are really relevant in my work, specifically how women can use joy as a form of resistance. So I'm really looking forward to hearing what our other panelists have got to say today as well.
And Elizabeth?
Thank you, Takhlai. I am Elizabeth Ihdago Gabrasillase, and like you said, I'm from Maravasit. I just want to thank you, Takhlai, for inviting me, and Tighat Forum also for creating this opportunity for us to reflect on our experiences about Ashenda and in general talk about what's happening in light of the Ashenda celebrations. So thank you for inviting me to this wonderful gathering.
Our pleasure. Rowena.
Hi, my name is Rowena Kasai, and I'm part of Tigray Youth Network, which is a diaspora initiative based in the UK, and I'm based in London. And I'm very excited to see what we unfold in this discussion. And really looking forward to it.
And finally, Sanet.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for inviting me here. I'm Sanet. I am Gwal Ashenda.
Thank you. Thank you all of you for joining. I'm really looking forward to this discussion, and I'm really happy that you have joined for this panel discussion. I know that it was on short notice, but hopefully we'll have an interesting discussion. So I will start with Hagos, and I was wondering if you could give us a little bit of an insight into the originations of Ashenda from its religious roots and how it historically morphed into a big cultural event that has transcended its religious significance, and it's become a rather all-inclusive religion agnostic event. So if you could reflect on those aspects, Hagos.
Okay, thank you, Taglai. Ashenda is one of the most remarkable ceremonies or festivals in Tigray, but it's not well studied scientifically. And there are some scholars say, or some scholars try to connect it with some of ancient religious things, like with Israel, for example, with the history of Joftah, as it's written in the book of Kings. Sometimes some people try to connect it with the history of Noah, as it's in the Bible, and sometimes the history of, or the story of Eve and Adam, that Eve had to cover her naked body with the leaf, and connecting it or interconnecting it with the Ashenda leaf. So there are lots of hypothetical explanations about Ashenda in connection to Judaism and Christianity and some of the cultures. But I personally would say Ashenda is homegrown and an indigenous culture of Tigrayans, and it's fully a kind of folklore, or it can be anthropologically explained that all the ingredients, all the values, the social values that we have in Ashenda are from homegrown materials. Like it has an oral tradition, it has the social performing folk arts, it has this material culture. I mean, all the four kinds of folklore that we have in Ashenda are indigenous. For example, like if we compare with Mescal, with Epiphany, Easter, or like Eid al-Adha, these religious and cultural festivals, we have still some international or a kind of common ingredients or values there. Like when we think of Mescal festival, the idea of cross, for example, is a global symbol. But anything that we have in Ashenda is exclusively from Tigray. So I would personally say Saint Yared of Aksum has formulated these 4 cyclic seasons: the summer, the spring, winter, and autumn. That's Saint Yared who has formulated for the first time. So during the summer season, we can observe some kind of course, as elsewhere in the world, a kind of environmental and ecological springing or flourishing, popping up, and a kind of like, it's not only ladies, but also all people, animals, flowers, plants flourish, jump, spring. So this is a kind of environmental, ecological plus cultural influence that has substantiated to bring the elements, the social ingredients of Ashenda that we have today. And then later it could have had, or it brought, based on the Christian exegesis or hermeneutics, and then it has been Christianized, and then metaphorically connected with the ascension of Saint Mary and the relation between Saint Mary and Thomas the apostle, while she was ascending to the heaven. And then the garment, that the idea of the garment, the symbol of the garment there is sometimes a metaphorical symbol or an allegory for Ashenda leaf. So there is always a question: is Ashenda religious or cultural kind of question, which always can trigger what is the demarcation between culture and religion, of course. Yeah, religion is more institutionalized, but still it's an institutionalized form of belief. And then we can think of social reconstruction and so on. And then we have also had in Tigray the idea of cosmetics, and then and then kind of social congregation of gender-specific things. It's not only Ashenda, by the way, that we have in Tigray. We have different cultures, like there was Aigo, there was a female social institution like Devarte, So many things. The only thing why we are concerned more about Ashenda is because it's one of the climax example of ladies institutional or a kind of carnival practice in Tigray. So I personally would say at the beginning, it is from culture, from folklore of Tigrayans, because everything is indigenous, and then everything was from cultural perspective, ecological and environmental influences is also there. And then later, which is the church and the state in general in Tigray or in Ethiopia, has been traveling together throughout the history after the introduction of Christianity. And then the church has been assimilating or a kind of, there was this dialect continuum of culture and religion under the same node, and supporting it with exegesis, or this what we call it hermeneutics. And then that's why we have this andimta Uddase Mariam, then connecting it with Ashenda. So generally, Ashenda is one of the most wonderful, intangible Tigrayan heritage. It's the day of freedom of ladies. I think others will explain it more. And I always wonder why UNESCO has registered Mescal Festival before Ashenda, because Ashenda is peculiar. What matters as a global heritage registration, like in UNESCO, is the peculiarity and all the ingredients that the heritage has. So from all perspective, Ashenda is, I don't think there will be such kind of festival, such kind of ceremony or carnival, gender specific, very indigenous, huge in number, millions of Tigrayan ladies celebrate it everywhere in Tigray, which sometimes has been extended to some other neighboring regions. So Ashenda is not well promoted around the world, and it's not recognized by UNESCO. Of course, there was a kind of attempt to studying for registration in the last 2-3 years, but yeah, it has to be given an emphasis to be one of the most wonderful intangible world heritage. It's cultural, religious. I mean, in Ashenda you can learn. It's like also an open air school in many things when it comes to Tigrayan culture. That's all what I can say.
Yeah, well, thank you, Hagos. I think that was an excellent exposition into the different parts of and aspects of Ashenda. But I think for me, the most important thing you mentioned was the distinction between religion and culture. I think when people debate about whether Ashenda should be categorized as a religious event or as a cultural event, they presume that there is a clear distinction between culture and religion, when in fact there is a strong crossover between the two, and it could be that it's both religious and cultural. And to me, it's something that has started as a religious festival or celebration, and due to different events, it morphed into something that is all-inclusive and that is religion agnostic. I think now in Tigray, people from different religions don't have problem reveling in and celebrating Ashenda, and it has grown to the point of completely transcending its religious roots. And I think that's an interesting conversation that people could have. But I will go to Osanet and ask her about her memories and experience celebrating Ashenda. I would presume that you had started celebrating Ashenda from your young age, and you'll have fond memories of that up until now, although this year you wouldn't have celebrated it in the most warm manner as you would have expected, given that it fell on the aftermath of the report from Amnesty, and it was the worst time to celebrate Ashenda. Could you reflect what Ashenda meant to you back then and now.
Yeah. Well, it's a bit hard to actually talk of after someone who knows a lot about the history and how it came and all, but I will just share my experience, which is what I remember about Ashenda is not only just the event, but the whole preparation, like a month ago, like before the actual event, what we do, the planning and all. Like, for example, the kind of clothes we want to wear, or the kind of group we want to create, because mostly if you see Ashenda girls playing, it's like they are in groups. Mostly those groups are neighborhood, or either they are neighborhood or friends. Well, for me it was my neighborhood, because I was born and raised in one place. And so we used to plan all these things, and also to the extent that who is going to collect the money, who's going to be leading us, who is going to where we're going to get the drums, because we have drums, traditional clothes and all, right, for the celebration. So we do this planning like a month before. And also we plan on where to meet and when to meet, like even that day, like what time and where we're going to meet. I also have my oldest sister. She's also celebrating Ashenda with me always. And we have neighbors who are also our friends. And then we discuss with them like the kind of clothes we need to wear, because we do this ahead, because we also have to convince our families to buy us all these dresses and jewelry for the event. Yeah, so since the holiday also, as it was a bit discussed before, it commemorates the heavenly assertion of Virgin Mary. We try to do the fasting as well, but this can be a bit subjective because I'm Orthodox, so we do that in my family. And on the day of the event, as we all know, all Tigrayan girls and women wear these beautiful traditional dresses, elfi. And when we go out to celebrate, our families would, and all the households would go out and see us. And all the girls and women look so mesmerizing with all these colorful dresses and costumes. And also our hairs are braided, which is not mine at the moment. And by the way, speaking of braiding, there is this long queue when we do this braiding. I'm remembering all these details because we always go through it every year. So we had to do it like we have to schedule ahead, or our sisters or moms would do it for us. If we need to go to the hairdresser, we have to schedule ahead because there's a long queue. And it's a beautiful event. And when we celebrate, during the celebration itself, it's like we go singing almost the entire city. And then, so I'm from different places, Tigrans and also other people from international, and also other people in Ethiopia as well. They used to join us and then celebrate with us. But also, for example, I was in the capital when I was working after I graduated, and then I used to always go back home to celebrate Ashenda. I can't miss it. I never miss it. But and my family who were in Addis, used to travel with me as well, because it was Ashenda is also like right before New Year, right? So they get their break, like their work break during that time. So they used to travel like a couple of days ahead of Ashenda, and then we used to go together. I remember, as an example to what Ashenda meant to me, I remember this event where I was not able to actually travel a couple of days ahead because I was working for this engineering company, and then we had a lot of projects to do. And then I was not able because I didn't get the permission to go because I have a lot of things to do. But then I also want to go. So I was like in a dilemma, and then but then later on, I decided to go ahead and get the tickets. And then when I go, I was not able to find a ticket, but I find one which actually flies on the day of Ashenda itself. And then that was it on the evening, even like it's like very late. And I get the ticket, but then so I get the ticket, I get my hair braided because it's gonna be too late if I go home. So I managed to do it in Addis. And then but then during the day I decided, okay, I think it would be better to just focus on my work and then celebrate Ashenda next year in a better way. instead of having, because it's late already. And then, so in the morning, I was like, okay, I'll just return the ticket. I'll just miss this Ashenda. And then all of a sudden I was like, I just go ahead and I opened Tigray TV. And then there was like a lot of celebration, like everyone singing with their beautiful dresses and all. And I was like, oh no, I'm going home. So I started collecting my stuff, and then I go home. So I bring this example because I want to express like how much it means for a lot of people. Because most of the time at a young age, we were like at school learning and supporting our families during our spare time. And it's not like we have all this time to go ahead and celebrate. And after we graduate, it's like we're working, we're too busy. But Ashenda is like, it's the whole day is for us. And the fact that our family have this beautiful day and blessed day that they only celebrate us, and which is dedicated only for us, it just makes it so unique. Yeah.
Well, yeah. Well, I could see what Ashenda means to you and the excitement and the joy it gives you written on your face. So thanks for going into the little details that people usually ignore. I think usually they talk about the big picture, but they don't go into the minutiae of the events and the routine that you do in preparation. But I think there is beauty embedded in that people don't usually talk about. So thanks for going into those details. And I could see the sense of nostalgia that you have now, and hopefully you will get an opportunity to celebrate it next year. But I would presume that Rowena has a slightly different experience, given that she has been in overseas for the most part. Although I know that you did celebrate Ashenda when you were young, mostly it was overseas, and that must be a slightly different experience. Could you talk about what Ashenda means to you, and what are the lessons that you learned, and how does the community that you live with use Ashenda to come together and to celebrate and to harken back to community back home and other aspects that Ashenda is used for by people who live outside Tigray?
Sure. I'll have to correct you though, because I spent Ashenda every year in Maqala until I was 17. So all my experience.
I stand corrected. Okay.
It's okay. Yeah, so I would travel back and I would be in Maqala for Ashenda, which is, as all of us know, it's at the end of August, and I would kind of spend my time when I was back home in between Addis and spending my time around Tigray, but a lot of it was spent in Maqala. And so it spans, the occasion spans from a couple of days. It can go on for a number of weeks, but I remember celebrating it, or like being back home and celebrating it, always felt like a monumentous occasion. It always felt like there's something big, and I can plan it with my just feel that excitement that Cassandra was referring to, with my mum and my aunts and my cousins and the neighbors as well. So I feel like for many of us in the diaspora, when we experienced Ashenda, it was through the lens of the women in our family. I felt like growing up, I felt like that added a charm to it, because it was like, it felt all encompassing. It was women of all ages around you. But I think the older I get, especially, I'm able to realize that it transcends this idea of like, it's a simple celebration, and it's a holiday, because it's a holiday exclusively for women. The customs then surrounding that are a reflection of that. So it feels like women-centered. But then, especially when I was younger, in a more kind of like superficial and a lighter note, it was fun to be 12 and to be out late and with friends and cousins and able to do as I please. It felt like it was like a takeover of the city of some sorts, which was exciting, which I didn't have access to here, which I'd never had. And I think that's what added to this charm and like feeling like it was monumentous. But for me, it was a kind of like, looking back now, I understand all these terms of freedom and self-expression. It was what it is, a holiday in which women are able to exercise agency and autonomy of self. And it's it's feeling like there's no attachment, or there's no fear or attachment of fear or shame to what you're doing. Or like there's no gendered connotations to staying out late, dancing, singing in a group of women without any men around, without a man protecting you or overseeing what you're doing. So it was like there wasn't a male gaze, there wasn't a man that was centered in it. And then little things like our beauty was for ourselves, it was defined for ourselves, it was our beauty was ours without like feeling like it was measured, it was dictated by somebody else, and there weren't any like hang-ups in wanting to look beautiful or delighting in that beauty or femininity. Which was really interesting because I was born and was raised in the UK, and so I didn't have access to that. I didn't have experiences like that.
Yeah, but you mentioned, Rowena, you mentioned femininity and sisterhood and other aspects that people raise during Ashenda. Do you think girls and women in Tigray and overseas use Ashenda as an excuse or as an opportunity to create those bonds and to discuss about different matters that women and girls face? Do you think that is one opportunity that it gives women?
Definitely. I mean, the songs in itself are about freedom and expression of self, are about gender. They're about wanting to play and not caring what anybody says and defying that. It's an act of defiance in a typically like really patriarchal society. So definitely it's about indulging and encouraging that, and just working together and dictating the terms in which you define your womanhood or femininity.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Rowena, for giving us your perspective. Elsa, if I can come back to you, I know that you have your own memories and you have your own celebrations of Ashenda since childhood, but I want to ask you a slightly different question in the light of what has happened over the last year. For 10 months now, we know what has been happening to women, and especially we know the report that Amnesty released regarding sexual violence and the gang rape and other indescribable atrocities that women of Tigray have found at the receiving end of. But still, it didn't stop us from celebrating Ashenda, although it was celebrated in a different context and for a different purpose, I would say. Maybe you could start by reflecting your own experience growing up and celebrating Ashenda, but I would like you to reflect on the unique aspect of Ashenda of this year and how it was used to advance the cause we have been trying to advance, given the situation we're in now.
Thank you, Takhlai. It's a very important question, and I would like also to start with a little bit of my experience. Most of my Ashenda memories are from my early childhood experiences, and I share all the beautiful things Rowena and Kasanet said, all the anticipation, the joy and the excitement, everything that they beautifully explained. But I want to add, I grew up in Aksum, so we celebrate Ashenda on a different day, and we call it Ainwari. It's, I think, 8 days after Ashenda. But everything, the essence of the holiday, Ashenda itself is the same. It's just the day is different. Like Kasana said, we used to start planning and talking about all the things that we are going to do like a month before the actual day. But these are the memories from my childhood. And I also wanted to add that the memories I have are like from a slightly different era. I grew up during the Civil War in late 80s and 90s, early 90s. So I remember mostly we were like young girls that we used to celebrate Ashenda during that time. Maybe it was a bit difficult for the mothers and the young adult girls to celebrate. But I think there were young ladies celebrating, but it was, my memories are about like young girls celebrating. Of course, Ashenda has been growing a lot in the past 10 years. So the styles and everything has been also growing at the same time. But to come to your question, Takhlai, I think the essence of, or the nature of Ashenda celebration has been changing even from last year, I would say. Due to COVID, there was this restrictions on mass gathering and public gathering. So I remember women and girls talking about how to celebrate it in a safe way. And in the diaspora community, I remember organizing like Zoom celebrations, Ashenda celebrations via Zoom. But on top of that, there was also this locust invasion that was happening in Tigray and in some parts of Ethiopia. So I remember seeing pictures of young girls fighting locusts during the Ashenda period last year around this time. So I would say women and girls in Tigray were already undergoing, they were already going under so much stress during last year. And then, like you said, in the past, like after the war broke out, in the period of 8 to 9 months, the atrocities and the suffering that the women and girls went through are unspeakable. So this year, I think Ashenda was used as an opportunity to amplify the suffering and the pain women and girls of Tigray have been enduring. And at this time also, they are going through a lot of pain and sufferings. The entire population in Tigray is, as you all know, going through collective punishment, mass starvation. And the women who have been going through a lot of sexual violence, rape, gang rape, and other aspects of attack that has been inflicted upon them. This time was like after the military withdrew from Tigray, they should have had the opportunity to seek help and support. But even though we say that now the rape and the sexual violence has been stopped, the pain and agony is still happening. They are going through a lot. So this Ashenda is used to amplify the suffering of those women and girls in Tigray. But at the same time, rape and sexual violence was used, like you said, as the Amnesty report indicated, it was used as a strategy of war, so to inflict pain, but at the same time to humiliate girls and women and to humiliate the population in general. So while we celebrated Ashenda and use it to campaign for our sisters in Tigray, we are also using it as a way to resist the I don't know how to say, I don't know if I should say the enemy that's planning and working to inflict on the woman and girls for us to be humiliated, ashamed, and stay silent. So we are using it to say, no, we cannot be silent. We cannot be silenced. So joy has been used as a form of resistance, and it gave us, I think, a lot of courage to use this opportunity. But at the same time, I would say we feel the sisterhood. So we feel that we have every woman, especially in the diaspora, every Tigrayan woman and girls feel the responsibility to speak up for the girls and women in Tigray. So from that perspective, it's very quite different from the previous Ashenda celebrations.
Yes, indeed. Thank you. Yeah, thanks, Elsa, for going into details into the pain that girls and women have been subjected to over the last year. And like you correctly say, that the enemy, if that's the word we should use now, has tried sexual violence and sexual slavery and the other aspects to try to condemn and Tigrayan women and girls into humiliation. But I think one positive aspect, maybe if we can call it positive, of this year's Ashenda was to try to tell a different story, to try to paint women in positive picture despite what has happened to them, and to try to depict women of Tigray in a positive light,
yes.
Despite what has happened. So, Sandet, I'm wondering if you could build on what Elizabeth mentioned and talk about how women were depicted in this year's Ashenda and how was it different in terms of trying to counter what the enemy is trying to do in terms of encouraging women, in terms of creating new sisterhood and other aspects that you will have observed. If you could talk a little bit about that.
Okay, thank you, Thik. To be very honest, this is a very difficult question for me because having to really think about that, it's really actually for all of us, it's very deeply emotional. Well, Ashenda is particularly joyful celebration about hope, renewal, and also women, right? But it's deeply changed this year because of the bad things that our people are going through. Instead of joy, we all share this heavy feeling because of the situation back home. And as we remember our separation from the people we used to celebrate it with, and that we're not able to reach them as well. So that makes it difficult. I think the hope and the renewal is really felt this year. After so much pain this year, I think we all know more deeply what those words mean. And celebrating women and girls this year also means commemorating the survivors of this sexual violence, mourning their pain, and also commuting to their support as well. As Elsa has also mentioned, we want to pray that this season will be over soon and a new or renewal will come for all of us to heal together. When I say new season to come for us to heal, I don't mean like that we wait for space and time, but since this is personal opinion, for me, it would be for us to heal whenever we're ready. I can only say and wish that for us to be ready. I wish we are ready now, all of us, and for the victims and for the people that we think are doing all the bad things. I wish we all heal now. That's all I can say.
Yeah, I do understand your pain, Sandet. I will, if I could come to Chessie, I'm sure you will be aware from your study of Tigrayan women and Tigrayan culture in general that historically Tigrayans have this culture of celebrating pain and suffering using joy and celebrations. I'm sure you'll have seen footages of former TPLF fighters, for instance, dancing and celebrating even after they have buried a comrade. It's a common tradition in Tigray to use celebration as a form of fighting. And this in particular, Ashenda has been used as a form of expressing joy, but for a different purpose, to resist and to advance a cause. Can can you talk a little bit about how, because this seems paradoxical, how do people use joy and celebration to resist? And could you talk in particular about how Tigrayan women, the celebration of Tigrayan women, and the and those sorts of things could be summoned and used for resistance?
Absolutely, yeah, that's a great question. Joy is powerful. First and foremost, joy is powerful. And if we look at autocratic regimes across history, across time, joyful things are often banned. So in Nazi-occupied former Czechoslovakia, for example, traditional folk music was banned. Beethoven has been outlawed in China, and North Korea carefully monitors the music that's allowed to be played. And of course, most recently in Addis, we've heard that places that were playing Tigrayan music have been either closed or forced to stop playing their music. So, and similarly, suppressing cultural dances has been a tool of British colonialism, as has been controlling religious expression, controlling language. Language is a very intricate form of oppression and resistance, which is why Tigrinya was targeted under the Derg regime. Maintaining language is a really important method of resistance. And I did a study a few years ago on the Protectorate of Bohemia and Moravia, which is part of the former Czech Republic, which is about how jokes were used to suppress, jokes were suppressed under the Nazis. But they were a way, using humor, using jokes were a way for the local population to maintain unity and identity, and sometimes as a form of resistance when language and its connections to national pride were being targeted by the Nazi state. And this is because joy is ultimately a way to channel energy and create momentum. And this threatens any ruling force that has precarious control and relies on strict hierarchies of age and gender, ethnicity, and so on. And this affects women quite strongly. And we see this around the world in the suppression of women's sexual expression, women's body autonomy, as well as a form of regulating the population by controlling reproduction and hierarchy, and also information and values. And it's found when we see what are designated as typically feminine forms of joy, like clothing or romance, being degraded, because this reinforces patriarchal hierarchies that privilege masculinity and the associated values. And I think this is partly what's so beautiful about Ashenda, is its unreserved celebration of womanhood in all its ordinariness. Ashenda promotes joy through group strength, and is this collaborative element that I think is really important when we look at the representation of women's resilience in history, because we can often fall into the trap of hero worship or heroine worship, where we select an individual and we put them on a pedestal for their exceptionalism and set them apart from everybody else. But this is quite damaging when it can be seen to represent that only some women are capable of some things. But the meanings imbued in Ashenda is to celebrate womanhood at the most normal level, so womanhood in its pure unexceptionalism, and it does this through group community focus of women coming together to celebrate women just as they are and for all that they do. And celebrations and joy in this way are a really natural part of human expression, and an embodiment in some ways of what it is to be alive and to thrive. And communal joy is something really unifying, and that we inherently seek out, sometimes even subconsciously. It helps release the oxytocin chemical at a scientific level, where we bond with other people and we feel love for them. And so there's some studies that have recorded that choir singers have synchronized heart rates when they're singing and connecting with each other. And if you're co-sleeping with a partner, you will sometimes synchronize your heart rate with them. And what this means is that ultimately a population that feels unified, that feel like they belong to one another and are part of one another and not as just individuals for themselves, they are harder to dominate and they're harder to break apart. And suppressing joy, particularly cultural joy, is a method of dehumanization. And in its most extreme, it's cultural genocide. And continuing to seek out joy in the hardest of circumstances is a way of holding on to humanity and refusing to give up what it means to be one self, to be your identity. And in this sense, it's a form of activism and a form of resistance to choose joy. And one of the biggest challenges about a protracted war is sustaining it, sustaining the drive for the fight, sustaining activism, momentum for campaigns. These are thankless tasks. The progress can feel slow, but existing in a prolonged state of negativity leads to burnout. Finding joy, on the other hand, is restorative. It gives you a renewed purpose and a reminder of what it is that you're fighting to preserve. And finally, just in the context of the Tigray War, where women have experienced such unspeakable violence, I think celebrating Tigrayan women goes beyond Ashenda this year, recognizing their beauty, resilience, creativity, self-love, sisterhood, all the things that Ashenda puts front and center, is really a way to recognize their trauma and make a promise that this does not define them. Joy is resistance, love is resistance, and refusing to categorize Tigrayan women in a way that an oppressor would want them to be categorized as a victim, as damaged, is part of that resistance as well. So I think loving Tigrayan women in all their splendor, this Ashenda, is also about making sure the story of Tigrayan women is not defined by pain and trauma. And I want to make it clear that by that, I don't mean that the women who have themselves experienced the violence need to classify themselves in that way. No one can speak for that except for them, and they will need psychological and physical support for the rest of their lives. But I still think that we as onlookers need to move away from the narrative that women are passive victims in a man's war and recognize the way that they shape and create identity for themselves through love and supporting one another, and through owning their freedom and through their refusal to be silenced.
Thank you, Chessie, for beautifully explaining how joy could be used as a form of resistance. But I say this because one of the tools that the people who have been supporting the war and the people who have been dismissing the suffering of Tigrayans have employed is to say, well, you can't be suffering. The suffering that you're talking about is fake and imagined, because if you suffering, how is it that you celebrating? How is it that you dancing? How is it that you going into these cultural events and stuff? And people don't seem to understand that in some cultures, and definitely in Tigray cultures, joy and celebration could be used as a form of resistance. That was beautifully explained. So thank you, Chessie. But I will go to Hagos, and I will ask you kind of the same question that I had asked to Rowena, Hagos, and if you could reflect the new dimension and the new essence and meaning that Ashenda could assume going forward given what has happened and given how it has been used this year. Do you think there will be a fundamental change in the way people will use Ashenda?
Okay, thank you. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Yeah, it has I think been explained much by all of the sisters. What I can understand during this Ashenda time, I've been asking if Ashenda once was abrupted in the history of Tigray, and I don't think it did. It was only like last year because of Corona, and this year because of the challenges of Ashenda. Last year they were celebrating Ashenda and then at the same time protecting this locust, and this year they are celebrating Ashenda, and even there are Tigrayan ladies who are members of TDF, and then even they were celebrating there. So this year Ashenda was a reverence and celebration in both cases, but most of the time in the Tigrayan social value, when it comes such kind of atrocities, problems, mainly from outside, Tigrayans used to make this kind of the notion of resilience, and using that kind of agony as an inertia for, it's like stringing positive energy like in a very high wave frequency, so that it can create a kind of a strong energy in the forthcoming. So the same was true for Ashenda this year. It's really touchy, it's really traumatizing. And one thing that we can understand why the Tigrayan ladies have been raped, have been killed, is simply because they refused to have, they were not willing to have sex with whom they don't know, because they have been exercising freedom, like in Ashenda time. So the sense of raping and the sense of the reason why they have been killed is also justifiably can be explained that they refused to be raped or they refused to have sex because they have been exercising freedom throughout their life, and that pinnacle part of or an exemplar part of this is Ashenda time. So we can see that Tigrayan ladies have good knowledge, epistemologically exposed to what freedom is, that they are autonomous to their body, to their expression, and so on and so forth. So why the violence becomes severe is simply because all the Tigrayan ladies are exposed to freedom, and then they refused to be raped. This Ashenda time, it's really a pity that they have been denied their freedom to celebrate Ashenda, that it's a time of reverence, not than celebrating Ashenda. But still, when I see around the world, in the globe, and the TDF members, even in Tigray, they are just celebrating it with 2-3 meanings. The discourse here I am observing is, one, it's like commemorating, venerating ladies or women who were raped during the war in the last 8 months, just remembering them. It's a kind of reverence. Second, it's a kind of joyful celebration, a kind of defending, or the intention of the invaders, the intention of these people who raped the Tigrayan ladies was to ashame the Tigrayan ladies, or to ashame in general the society. So it's like we are not getting ashamed of ourselves. We are proud of ourselves. I am proud of a woman, kind of releasing energy. So they are celebrating with a kind of, it's not, I don't call it it's rage, but it's like a kind of positive energy. And then it can be a platform, stepping stone, even in the first coming. And I assume, or maybe I can also recommend in the first coming, that Ashenda will be not only ladies' celebration or festivity or carnival, but I think it will grow to a big institution that will sit in a global table to give justice on women. So I for sure there will be a big Ashenda institution for justice, because once Ashenda become, like, Ashenda has to be very substantiated, or it has to be registered in UNESCO. Then this event by itself has, I think, branded Ashenda more than ever. So all these ingredients can bring or can contribute their own share in bringing Ashenda and institutionalize Ashenda as a big platform for justice, mainly for women in Africa or around the world. So as most of you mentioned or said, it has its own positive results, irrespective of the negative or the other things. And I believe in Tigray and also around the world, ladies will celebrate it more in the first coming and next year, for example. And I believe they will remember. There will be a kind of contemplation of, or kind of anticipating and venerating the ladies of Tigray. Like, in Tigray, we remember the martyrs that we have lost throughout history. So I also recommend and believe, for example, in the next year, there will be at least 1 day or 1 hour or a kind of 2-3 hours, couple of hours, a kind of contemplation or prayer to remember these honorable, disrespected ladies, women, and teenagers that we have lost in 2020 and 2021. And this will bring, I think, a kind of synergy and teamwork of the ladies to bring it into an institution, then modernize it more, and then to have a say in the global stage for all women around the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Hagos. I think you have raised a huge point when you say that the essence and significance of Ashenda could be elevated in the light of what has happened over the last year, and we could make it a new venue for channeling our frustrations and for doing other things that we would want to do as a people. But can I do some mic check with Rowena? Are you back? Really, we had lost you for a moment earlier.
I'm back. Can you guys hear and see me well?
I can hear you now. So I will ask you the same question again, but maybe I will reframe it, given that Hagos has kind of answered the question. So we mentioned earlier that Ashenda it was purely religious in its beginning, in its origins, but due to historical contingencies, it has become the thing that it has become now, which is all-inclusive, different aspects from femininity, from liberty, from freedom, from equality to other aspects. And given what has happened to us as a people, it wouldn't be a surprise if some of the frustration and some of the pain that we have been made to endure would find their expressions in Ashenda going forward. So I can imagine Ashenda fundamentally changing going forward. Do you see that? Do you see that Ashenda will in a basic fundamental way change in the future?
Yeah, I think it would. Without, if we're acknowledging what has happened in the last 9 months, it would be, I don't know, I just think it's inevitable that it would evolve into something else naturally, as it did from the beginning. So I can kind of imagine that it would, it will become a necessity to celebrate Ashenda. It will become, as Jesse said, a form of joy, as a form of resistance. And I think because so much of our identity and our tradition, our customs have become so politicized, this in itself will become a political statement. So, kind of by default, by engaging in Tigrayan culture, it'll be an act of defiance in the eyes of some, and the eyes of those who have been inflicting the violence on Tigrayan women and on what it means, womanhood in general, I suppose. But it will become a kind of, future celebrations will become a celebration of womanhood or of liberation. And I can imagine it will be felt more with a sense of remembrance, similar to what Hagos said. But also it could play a monumental part in our healing process, or it could symbolize that also. But it could be that we kind of like reframe and reshape kind of words and terminology we use when discussing survivors of the sexual violence. So, oftentimes, like when we discuss Ashenda, it may help us address these ideas of worth and purity that we've previously attached, and what these terms symbolize, what's attached to them, what it means to be Tigrayan woman under the guise of purity and innocence and worth, which will make that an aspect of our liberation as well. So this idea that our worth isn't intertwined with what's perceived as innocence, or what's perceived as what's attached to innocence. But also kind of like reframing words we use when discussing survivors of sexual violence. I think it will be instrumental to future celebrations of Ashenda, when especially a population like ours that has been as brutalized as ours, that will change the course of future celebrations. So it will be, I think, as a result of that, or as a consequence of that, you're unpacking ways in which as a community we perceive and understand trauma, especially something as horrid as sexual violence. And I think because of these things, because of these contributing factors, Ashenda will play a massive part in the future in our healing process as a community, in our acceptance and tolerance as well.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think going forward, other people, we will utilize every cultural asset, and Ashenda is a big, huge cultural asset in our repertoire to advance ourselves as a society. So that's a good point you raised. So I will go to my final question, and it's going to be to Elsa. I want to ask you, Elsa, about now we were saying that the things that we do on Ashenda, femininity, freedom, and the other all good things that we do on Ashenda, you want them to be done throughout the year. There aren't things that you want them to be restricted to one day or 1 week per year, right? And I'm just wondering if you could think of ways of how we could extend those things to become embedded in our culture, to be done always, not just one day or 1 year, and how it could become a community effort rather than only women and girls, but men could also be brought in to the fold, and we utilize it to better ourselves as a society. Can you think of ways how we could do that?
Thank you, Taghlai. I think that's a very fundamental question that we all need to think about in like future celebrations, because it's about women and it's about girls. It's about sisterhood, all this nice things you mentioned, femininity, beauty, and everything. But also Ashenda is about society. So it's very important that men feel involved, especially when we think of how Ashenda is being celebrated this year. So like you guys said, the meaning of Ashenda, or the meaning that will be attached to how Ashenda is celebrated, will be changed, of course. So we have been trying, like for the last 10 months, we have been trying to make sense of what's happening as individuals, as women, men, and the whole society. So Ashenda could be one platform to find, to understand and find the meaning. So in that process, it cannot be only for women and girls. It needs to be a very inclusive platform that all feel involved. I'm sure maybe Hagos could add that men have like, they play great role, young boys great role in Ashenda celebrations, but it's of course Women's Day. But I think, I mean, for me, growing up in a like slightly conservative society, Ashenda was probably the only day that you feel like you get to be you. So that's the fundamental essence that we need to really unpack. What does that mean to understand? What does being you mean? What does, especially for women, for girls, and to have it's not only the women going out and celebrating, singing, and feeling the joy. It's the society is behind them when they do that. So we need to understand that, to study that, to make it the concepts and the essence behind it that we can relate to our daily life. Like when we say Ashenda girls, we respect their choices. So what does respecting women's choice means? What does that joy as a resistance means? So all these things we need to understand, we need to study in order to understand. We need to talk about them all the time, maybe not every day, but we need to give a platform to those ideas, because most of the time we try to understand and analyze concepts that come from the Western world, the developed world, when we think of development, harmony, democracy, and stuff like that. So we need to come back and look at this peculiar culture and tradition and understand it, what that means from the perspective of creating a harmonious and developed or I don't know how to say it, but a well-being of the society could be utilized through understanding of our own cultures. So you find everything in Ashenda, the things that we want to have, the things that we want to experience in our daily life, but we don't talk about them. So one mechanism is to talk about them, to really kind of categorize what it means from the woman perspective, from men perspective, and from the society in general. And at the same time, Jesse and Hagos were talking about the possibility of having teamwork during Ashenda. I think looking back now, I think it was the early years of my life where I learned coordination and working together with people and kind of learning how to plan ahead about things. And Ashenda is the only time that almost everyone in Tigray can come together. So we could use that platform to kind of enhance working in teams and coordinating in different aspects of life, but not only just the day of celebration, but we can use that day to create something that can be used throughout daily life, or for the society in general. But it needs discussion and talking about it and writing, of course, about it, and celebrating it, of course. Thank you.
Yeah, I think the most important point you raised is Ashenda is a day or a week when you become yourself. And for me, the most important takeaway from that is that we have to aspire to create a society where people can become themselves, not just on those weeks, but every day, and it becomes an inherent aspect of our culture. So that's the wish, but again, you can't just wish and things don't happen. You have to work, you have to strive for that. So that would be my my takeaway message. But I think we have gone past the allotted time. But nonetheless, I will give you 1 minute each to summarize, because I really like this discussion. So who cares? So I will start with Hagos, and I will give you 1 minute, but don't go beyond 1 minute. You meet, yeah.
Okay,
please
thank
go.
you. Yeah, I mean, I also, Ashenda is a kind of disclosure of disclosure for the hibernated kind of freedom within the ladies or teenagers. And then it's like a pause or a break of dominance. I mean, the ladies are not independent in days other than Ashenda. So as Elizabeth said, it has to be, Ashenda should be a center of the wave that has to be expanded to our daily life. And most of the time in gender cases, the problem I see are like the gender institutions advise the woman, but it has to, the advice has to be for the man, mainly for the man, otherwise for all. So yeah, I could have said many, incidences, what I had come across in Tigray or in Mekelle, and we wouldn't have time. So yeah, we should exercise it. Freedom should not be a notion of celebration or carnival and so on, but it should be daily life. And then mainly we men have to understand and have to talk about it, have to write about it. Yeah, we have to respect our mothers, our sisters, and then everything. Yeah, that's what I can say.
Thank you, Chessie.
Yeah, this has been so wonderful. So thank you all so much for sharing your experiences. Just one story that came to mind when we were talking was actually from Auschwitz, and one of the prisoners there was trading rations in order to gather materials to celebrate Hanukkah. And he was asked, how can you be doing Hanukkah in Auschwitz? And he said, no, we especially do Hanukkah in Auschwitz. And that just really came to mind when we're thinking about Ashenda this year. Of all years, this year is a year for women to celebrate women. So thank you all.
Thank you, Chessie. Kasanet?
Thank you. I actually don't have much to say, but I would like to stress on Elizabeth's idea. You also summarized it as well, that let's not just make it a week or 2-3 days event, but then let's exercise to let other people be themselves. I would also reiterate that in a way, I wouldn't, of course, I want to put this responsibility on the society and everyone involved as well, but also on the girls themselves, the people who are celebrating it. What does it mean to be you? Figuring that out and then living that would mean a good accomplishment. So I just want to stress on that.
Thank you, Kasanet, and thank you for joining us in a very short notice. And Rowena?
Well, I think many things. I hope Ashenda remains an occasion in which beauty and womanhood are defined entirely by Tigrayan women and not by non-Tigrayan or Western standards. And I hope it just remains a symbol of joy and resistance in the most authentic way. And it's used in a process of healing, rebuilding, and fosters more conversations of tolerance and acceptance.
Thank you, and thank you for the gorgeous Ashenda hairdo. Appreciate that. And finally, Elizabeth, 1 minute.
Thank you everyone. This was a really wonderful time, and to reflect on Ashenda. I think this is the first time that I get to discuss what it means, what was their experience and stuff like that. So I hope that we can do programs like this in the future. And I also hope that Hagos mentioned that there has been some initiatives to advocate for Ashenda to become a UNESCO, what is it called, UNESCO heritage. So to be registered in UNESCO heritage. So I really hope we take that seriously and we work and continue the initiatives that have been done before for Ashenda to be recognized, to get the recognition that it deserves. And thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Elsa, and thanks for the gorgeous dress as well. So it was brilliant for me to sit here and listen to you guys reflect and give different perspectives. And my hope for next year is that we don't do it on Zoom, but we go to Matala, meet in person, dance, and do this kind of panel discussion. That would be my wish, and I'm 100% sure that it would become a reality. But for today, I appreciate you joining me, and thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good night.